Welcome back to Hypnagogue. I want to thank you all immensely for your support last week and your continued support in tuning in today. I am really excited to have you here. I want to remind everyone that this story is also available on Substack under the same name, Hypnagogue. So if you prefer to read your stories rather than listen to them, you can go there, switch back and forth, whatever you best like. I'm not quite ready to give out my personal contact info or any contact information here, but a lot of you know me, and I am looking and thinking about what other mediums or outlets it would be good to share this story on. So if anyone has any ideas, like any other social platforms that you use regularly, I would love to hear it. So without further ado, let's get into the second chapter. This is chapter 2, an appropriation of death. Two days later, I was standing in the upper watchroom when I saw a black speck on the hills creeping slowly towards the lighthouse, as silent and harmless as an ant crawling an anthill. It was a carriage. As I watched the carriage come closer, I began to feel the wearied impatience of the person who was on board. It was a hypnotist doctor, sent from the headquarters city of Elufeus's employer. The house-calling carriage, which she now traveled inside of, was encumbered with all the usual trappings: suture kits, tuning forks, bell sets, pendulums and pendulum props, wind chimes, painkiller reeds, singing bowls and their mallets, a large collection of stimulants, an even larger collection of sedatives, and, of course, strapped to the back of the carriage, a black coffin box. Elufeus's 3 sons and I gathered out on the road to greet the visitor, and soon the racket crested the nearest hill and was too quickly rattling and rankling itself upon us. The doctor who stepped out was disheveled. None of the sons realized how young she was, what with the soot on her face. Her hair, knotted and dusty, she had pulled into a tight bun on the top of her head, an attempt at professionalism. The carriage clattered a bit as she stepped down off of it. She addressed us politely. "I'm a doctor," she introduced herself, "and I'm here with the Lording Company. I've come in regards to Elufeus's right to reincarnative medicine at end of life." Elufeus's eldest flinched, then composed himself. "Doctor, my father has already answered your company's question. He formally denied his black box option a long time ago, and again when another representative of your company came here 2 months ago. Why are you here again?" "My intention is not to disrupt your final days with your father, nor anything like it. She sighed, turned around, and gestured to the big, cluttered carriage behind her, and recited breathlessly from the corporate constitution. "Every person should be allowed the right to reincarnative procedure," she said. "No matter what box Elufeus checked on his ledger, my materials and my presence are required to be here by corporate law." No one said anything to this. "The company respects Elufeus's decision," she added, feeling awkward. The 4 of us stood in silence for a minute. To her credit, she was sincere as she could be. I even think Avrik, the youngest boy, the one who was studying to be a hypnotist himself, believed her a little. I think that secretly he was even a bit glad to see her there, though he might not admit it. Naturally, since beginning his trance studies at the missionary school, he'd become less and less opposed to the idea of reincarnative medicine. But Avrik also knew his father too well, and even he felt this visitor to be deeply unwelcome. No matter how disgruntled the house was, by local custom, the doctor could expect to stay at least a couple of days. Elufeus's lighthouse was a whole fortnight's ride from the city which he came, and she was owed at least half that in hospitality. By her mere arrival, the hypnotist had earned herself nearly 6 days on the premises. The woman had the advantage of time on her side. Without any more words for the moment, the 5 of us shuffled inside. I showed her to where she could take care of her carriage and horse, and once she was inside, gave her some bread. The brothers had already stormed upstairs to gently break who had just arrived to Elufeus, and to hide from her. She bellied up to the counter in the kitchen and took the bread thankfully from me. I eyed her. She was absolutely exhausted from the journey and wondering when I'd tell her where she could go rest her head. I was going to tell her when she spoke. I shouldn't have come here. I said nothing in response. She jolted, as if remembering her manners, and looked up at me, reaching her hand out for a shake. I apologize. I didn't see a 4th son on Elufeus's ledger. You must be... Not Elufeus's son. Oh, she blushed. My apologies. I assumed. She cocked her head and squinted at me. You look a lot like the rest of his sons. I laughed. I know. Well, it's nice to meet you. What brings you here then? Do you work for the master? Sure. I've worked for him for 15 years, I said. Wow, she whistled casually. A new hire then, climbing the ladder, I'm sure. You seem smart. I chuckled and I told her she could stay in the 2nd bedroom. Avrik and Seladin slept in there, but I assured her that we would figure something out. I left her alone in the kitchen to finish her bread and find her own way to the room. That night, she was not allowed to enter Elufeus's bedroom. You're probably all expecting for me to have come here with some kind of offer, as your father and my's company would not have sent me without one. Malian turned to look at her, slowly, but he did not say anything. The doctor's face was now clean, and her round, unblemished face betrayed her naivete. She was a junior hypnotist, so far licensed for not even a full calendar year. We all could have guessed what the offer was, of course. But she wouldn't proceed until someone either said it for her or prompted her back. I finally got annoyed enough to do it myself. And what is that? Well, you can imagine that as Elufeus's legal guardianship, the company really does not want to see this happen. It's very difficult. Seradin frowned. For you? Which threw her off her bit. Well, for the company. No one can deny just how difficult this all is to watch. I can't imagine She stopped herself. That's not important. What's important is that Elufeus knows the full extent of his legal positioning and options. She leaned in and said in a confidential manner, transparently, Elufeus has some leverage here. Examining the disgust on all of our faces, she added, only if he wants it. Avrik scoffed and, looking away, shook his head. Even her bones squirm, he said. The hypnotist pretended not to hear this, but it hung in the air while we finished out the rest of the meal in silence. At the end of the meal, she offered to help clean up. I declined the offer. Insulted and even more beaten down, the doctor trudged off to her bedroom. To everyone's surprise, Elufeus requested the doctor's presence first thing the next morning. The woman was still surprised when she walked into his bedroom. She took in the death stench of the room, the chaotic mess of books and papers and pens, and then, finally, Elufeus, sitting there in bed. The moment she laid eyes on him, she realized that all this time she had actually been quite scared to see him. She waited there in the doorway. Let the vulture in, he said. Elufeus had sat himself up and stared her down as she came to his bedside. As I understand it, Doctor, you have come to inform me of the professional leverage of which I am now in possession? She nodded. I am interested about the conditions of this offer. Here, he gestured to the chair beside him. She had not expected such speedy interest. She was flustered, and as she sat down beside him, she added, "I have the full offer letter in my suitcase if you would like to see. You brought a black box with you." "I did. Yes, sir." "So you could perform the procedure right here on the grounds, if need be. That's very thoughtful of the company." "It's just the law, and anyways, it would be unreasonable to expect that you travel at this time. And what would they be willing to negotiate exactly?" he added, with devilish eyes, his chin turned up in a dramatic flare. "What would they give me for my death?" She looked around the room, observing, thinking. "I don't know, sir. This is a drafty home. What if they built you a new one? Or those books I see on your tables and shelves? You could have more. A lot more. And are you the one who will negotiate the details of this offer with me?" Her eyes went wide, apparently surprised by the question. "Oh, I'm not licensed for that. At the appropriate time, you would convene with one of our attorneys." "Appropriate time? Hmm. What appropriate time? Hmm? When might I iron out the details of such an agreement?" "At the appropriate, I mean, child, will this conversation occur before or after I die?" Her mouth gaped open a bit, wordless. Elufeus's eyes narrowed as he pressed further still. "They expect me to do this negotiating in the next life, do they not?" They both knew that this was indeed the case. It was the implication. They both knew it was exceedingly unfair to Elufeus. The moment squirmed between them in discomfort, Elufeus broiling in anger, and the doctor resisting a strong urge to recoil away from him. Eventually, some words came to her. An excuse. Her whole body relaxed, as though she'd found the escape door. "Well, you have to admit, sir, you would not be the one benefiting from this arrangement. There are plenty of ways in which it is far more appropriate to come up with your terms in the next life. I mean, he's the one who'd be getting them." She even found the levity to laugh. Elufeus was finally, absolutely disgusted by this display of wanton and willing ignorance. "No!" He jolted up in bed, knocking some books off his nightstand. "I do not have to admit what is and is not appropriate." His face had turned red. "Listen to me. I will save you much suffering. This is your employer's idiocy. It assumes pigeon-headed things and tries to operate them as fact, but it cannot. Just as you cannot today. You cannot sail a rock into the ocean." His next look pierced right through her. "Do you feel as though every day you are drowning? Breathing used to be so much easier, did it not? It's because you are drowning. Constantly. All the time. Get her out of my room." At this, the doctor bolted out of the room. I would not see her again until the end of the evening, when she came out of her bedroom to receive her meager meal. She looked none of us in the eyes except for me once. Even as she searched for some sign of empathy or understanding, I denied it to her. I do not know exactly what Elufeus would have wanted had he been in his usual temper, but I knew what he wanted now, and his fury burned through me. I could not spare her the kindness of a smile. Not now. Now, dear listener, know that what I personally despised about this whole situation, what still burns a hole through my stomach when I just think about it, is not the doctor, or the landlord and company, or this disruption of events. It is that Elufeus spent his last days as a slave to this rampant, ungovernable loathing. Where he once slept still through the night, he now tossed and turned. Where he once spoke with love, he now grew short and impatient. Where he could once focus his thoughts on any number of curious objects and discussions, he could now only sustain his mind on this one subject: the visiting hypnotist doctor, the employer who'd sent her, and the hatred he bore them. She spent 3 more days on the premises, only half of what she was owed. To her credit, she tried to stay away from Elufeus, spending most of her time walking the hillsides. Except for nighttime, when we were obliged to collect ourselves together within the small rooms of the cottage, she did her best to stay away. Death was ringing its last bells for Elufeus. He hung on out of spite. He would not die while that woman remained on the grounds. This increased my friend's suffering. As he spent his energy resisting the alluring whisper of death, he was exerting himself by no small amount and expediting his demise. When she finally departed, Elufeus collapsed in his bed, and he let out a rattled breath so wary I nearly mistook it for his last. But it was not. Not quite yet. Now, I will say by this point, I really should not have still been at Elufeus's side. But he had been so upset, and I felt I could not leave before the doctor had left. She could not outlast me. Not in this. Not an hour after she had finally departed, I went to Elufeus's room and said my goodbye. Neither of us were particularly mindful in our last words. I was preoccupied with the logistics of my evacuation, and Elufeus was collapsed into himself with exhaustion. I sped out the back door, dashing towards the stables without even a saying goodbye to the sons. It didn't matter. They had already forgotten I'd been there. Out in the stables, I found the most well-rested, spirited mare, an Appaloosa, white hair and black spots. We would go bareback. Hastily, I threw just a blanket down to pad myself against his spine and vaulted myself up. We would ride as fast and as hard as we could up the coast. I had to get as far away as I could.